Hallo allemaal en welkom bij deze nieuwe video is what a localized greeting of this video could sound like if I were to do it in Dutch. And, the Dutch people will now have this warm fuzzy feeling and feel like, ooh, I feel right at home. And that's exactly the thing that you want to do with your app as well. So in this video, we're going to learn how to add localization to your .NET MAUI Blazor app. So localization can be a really powerful tool to connect your audience better with your app. So because, there is regions and countries in the world where they like to speak Spanish. Spanish is a big language. So if you're going to roll out your app in Spanish, then it's more likely that more people will use it. So it can be a really powerful tool to spread your app even further. Now with .NET MAUI Blazor and also with Blazor, because you can use this in both basically, it's very easy to do. The existing tools are already there, you just have to connect the dots basically. I've already created a video on how to show platform-specific dialogues through .NET MAUI Blazor. The video should pop up in the top right corner of your screen right now, and I'm going to use that sample as a start for this sample app for this video, because there's a couple of ways that you can translate the things, that you can localize the things, and I want to show you all the variations, so that's why I'm going to show you through the sample app of the previous video. Now, let's quickly switch over to Visual Studio and see how we're actually going to do this. So here we are in Visual Studio 2022 and the Android emulator is already running here. So this is the sample app where we left off from the previous video. So be sure to check that one out. Note how it says hello world here. That's the first thing we're going to localize, and the only thing that I implemented in the previous video is here. If you go to counter, then you have this counter which looks regular, but if you click me, then it will give you this dialog, which is like the actual platform dialog on Android. So there's nothing HTML, nothing about this. Really powerful. Go check out how to do that. But this gives us a couple of nice scenarios to show you the different ways how to localize all the things here. So with that out of the way, let's just actually stop this from running for now. The first thing we want to do is go right click our project and then say manage NuGet packages. And the thing that you want to search for is Microsoft.Extensions.Localization. You can see it already here that I searched for it before. And this already has 210 million downloads. So that is mind-blowing. But this also shows the real power of Blazor and .NET MAUI and the unification of all the .NET things, because this package has been around for very long. You can use it with ASP.NET, you can use it with Blazor, you can now use it with .NET MAUI, and I think you can maybe even use it with regular .NET MAUI, so not even Blazor, which makes this really cool. So let's install this, and because of that, you can reuse all of these concepts that you already know. I'm clicking through a couple of dialogues here. Let's wait for this to be installed. It is now, and boom, we're done. So the one thing that we need to do to initialize this is go to our MAUI program, where we find the generic host builder, which is also a concept that is now known from different .NET projects. So I have a video on that as well, explaining a little bit more in detail. It should pop up on your screen in the top right corner, or you can find it down below in the video description. So I'm going to skip over that, assuming that you know a little bit about this. And what we can do is say builder dot, whoops, it wants to tell me that I'm really wrong here, builder.services.add localization. And that's all we need to do to wire up the localization here. What it will do, I'm not sure exactly all the things it does. Maybe it does just this one thing, and that is register the dependency injection for the IStringLocalizer in our dependency injection container, so that we can access that everywhere we need it, and we can pull out the resources for that. We'll see that in a minute. First, let's add some actual resources. So let's right click again on our project. Well, not on our project actually. Let's go into our resources, where we already have fonts and images and raw, but I'm going to add a new folder here. And I'm going to call that languages, which, you can name it differently if that's what you want, but I'm going to call it languages. And inside of that, I'm going to add a new item, and that's going to be a resources file. So you can already see it here, a resources file, a .resx file. And I'm going to call it my strings. Again, you can call it different names if that's what you want. Maybe you can have multiple resx files. We will see how to work with that in a little bit. So you can divide them up per module of your application, whatever you want. And you will get this graphical editor. Actually, while we're here, there is a great, I think it's called the ResxManager. Go check that out, which will actually help you with translations automatically. It can reach out to AI services, translate all kinds of strings. You just have to put in an API key really powerful. But what we're after is just this thing right here. So what you can do here is under name, you're going to specify a key, and then here you're going to specify a value. And then we're of course going to reference that key, and depending on the language, it's going to get a different value. But this works all automatically based on a naming convention of your files. Really cool. So let's just put in a name here, and let's call it hello world. You probably want to keep it like, without spaces, just enter a string name, uppercase, lowercase, maybe some numbers if you're feeling adventurous. And we're going to say hello world. Now note how I put in a capital W here so we can see like the little difference in a little bit. And that's all we need to do to set up our first resource. Now let's go back to our index.razor and actually use this. So I'm going to say add inject, which is the way I'm going to inject the dependency in here, IStringLocalizer, and I have to specify like the resource type that it's going to have to use. So this is going to be my strings. Now it doesn't know about it yet, and I'm going to give this a name, localizer. So I'm going to use the IntelliSense here that will help me to import all these things using Microsoft.Extensions.Localization and using MAUI Blazor Localization sample resources languages. I'm going to take these usings, I'm going to cut them out of here, and I'm going to go to the imports.razor, and I'm going to add them here because all the localization stuff is going to be on all over all the pages, right? So you want to have that in a single place, which is this place, and now it knows all these using over all the different pages. So now this inject just works, it knows all the types here, and what I can then do is remove this hello world. Notice the lower case W here, and I'm going to say add localizer. And you can just have this key thing here where you can say hello world. So you can just use it like this, like it's some kind of collection, and you can get this key out of here and it will get the value for you. So if I were to run this on Android, then you would see that the hello world would now come out of my resources and it would have the capital W and it would appear like a regular string because it is just a regular string. So the project is done building, the app is being deployed, so it's going to come up. While we're here, you can see here apps zoeken. So I already set this device to Dutch, so we will see how that switches automatically. And here it's loading our application, and you can see the hello world right here. So this is kind of like the very basic example where you just use this localizer in HTML inside of your Razor pages, right? So that works perfectly. Actually, let's just finish this from end to end. So I'm going to stop running here, and I'm going to add this Dutch language. So the thing that you need to know to do this is kind of like the language code. So NL for Dutch, DE for German, ES for Spanish, and so forth. I think these are the ISO language codes, which is, standardized, so you can use them, look them up if you don't know which one to use exactly. But for each language, you will have to add this extra resource file. So if you don't specify a language's code, that's going to be the default, that's going to be the fallback. Whenever there is no localization available, it will take that one, which is probably English, but it can be anything. So let's add a new one inside of my languages. I'm going to add a new item, and it's still on the resources file, so that's convenient. And it has to be the same name, right? So it's going to be mystrings.nl. It's going to be the Dutch one. So here you will have to add the same key. So I'm going to say hello world because it's going to find it by this key, right? And then here it's going to be hello wereld, which is Dutch for hello world. And if I run this again, because the emulator is already set to Dutch, you will see that the Dutch language will now show up. So if the app is now coming up again, you can see that it says hello wereld. It will automatically pick up on the Dutch thing here. Now, what does work is the fallback language to whenever you selected a language on the device that is not in your resources, it will fall back to that, but it doesn't work if you have one key that isn't found. So if there is one key in your global mystrings.resx, which is not in your mystrings.nl.resx, it's not going to automatically figure out that it has to cascade and kind of like show the English version. So you really have to make sure that all the strings, all the keys are in all the dictionaries that you are putting out here, right? So be aware of that. So we now have the Dutch translation, and this is in HTML through the Razor syntax, which is really great, but maybe you also want to have the translations in code, right? So let's have a quick look at that. Before we do, a quick tip here, you can see the access modifier. So you can set this to a couple of different things, internal, public, because what happens here with this resx file is if you click it open here, there is this designer.cs. So this is an auto-generated C# class that will automatically figure out for you where to get the right language code, where to get the right string values. And if we scroll down here, you can see for each of the keys that we add here, a property is generated, and that will make sure that we get the right string value. So that is how it works. I remember that I ran into a scenario where it said like, hey, you can't access this property because the modifier was less accessible, etc., etc. So this is the setting that you want to then fiddle with a little bit, and then it works. So a little pro tip here in the middle. Now let's go to our code. So that was in the pages in the counter.razor, and here we had that little dialog, right? So maybe you want to show something in a dialog, and the dialog is coming from code. So here we have this static string. Let's just start with that one. And again, we're going to here say inject IStringLocalizer of my strings, and let's call it localizer again. And of course, I can just use this the same way, but now in code. So let's just say localizer, and I can say count is title. So I'm just going to come up with any kind of key here, and I have to make sure that that's in my resources. So let me cut out the actual static string here. Count is title. Let's remember that. And I'm going to create a new one here. Count is title, and put in the value. And of course, for my Dutch one, I'm going to say count is title, and I'm going to put in a value, but now I'm going to translate it. So now it's going to be de teller staat op, which is Dutch for the count is now. A little bit freely translated. So now we have that as well. Now, if I were to run this, you would see the title. So I'm going to show you that in one go, because this next one is actually much more interesting, because this one has kind of like this value, this variable in here, right? So how are we going to go about that? Well, let me create a new localizer with a new key again. So let me do localizer, and now we're going to say count is message. And I'm going to again cut this message from right here. So let me just do that, and I'm going to put it in my thing here again, right? So in my resources, count is message. And what I want to do now with the value here, it said like my variable name, but now I want to add a counter here. So for the first one, it's going to be 0 because we start counting at 0, right? But if you have like another variable that you want to use, then make it 1 and then make it 2. So there is a order of things here, but it's going to do a string format and replace all these things for you. So count is 0 with the curly braces. Is that okay? And let's do it for Dutch as well, because else it's going to say that it can't find it. So count is message, and put the value in here. Let's make this teller is dot goed, which is again the Dutch translation. And let's make this then 0 again. So that has to be kind of like the same format. But you can play with this like where the value is going to show up, right? Because in all the languages, that's kind of like what is different. So let's just do this, but now we still have to specify like what variable do we need to put in here. And in this this identifier thing, we can say, hey, I want to have this params object arguments. So I can specify an infinite amount of arguments here, and I can now say, what was it? The current count. There we are. So current count is now going to be replaced on that 0 one. But if I have a next one, I can add another one. So I can do current count again, right? So now we would have 2 if I would have like an extra curly braces set in my actual string here. So whenever we run this now on Android, what we're going to see is that we're going to get an error. Taper names my string. Oh, I've got the S here, so that happens. Live coding, and if we run this now, then you would see that the title is localized, which is just a static string, but now we're doing it from code, and the other one actually has a variable in here that can be dynamic, right? So that is really cool. The application is coming back up, and then we have to go to our counter, and we go to our counter and we say click me, and because it's set to Dutch, it says the teller staat op, teller is 1, and if I do it again, it will say 2, right? So it really replaces that variable value, and the rest is all localized, and you can do that for all kinds of languages, which is really cool. And now you know how to localize your .NET MAUI Blazor app and your regular Blazor app, because that will work absolutely the same. Not only do you now know how to localize your .NET MAUI Blazor app, but also your regular Blazor app, which is really, really amazing. I know David Pine, who is working as a content developer, I think, at Microsoft, who does a lot of great stuff with Blazor as well. He actually developed a GitHub action that will go out to a AI service and do all kinds of machine translated translations on your resx file. So I will link that down below in the video description as well. Go have a look at that. Of course, what you would want to have is not machine translated, but no one knows all kinds of like 50 languages from their head, right? So you can provide some kind of translation if that's what you want, but ultimately what you want to do is provide a real translation. That's always the best that is done by a human, and now you know how to do it. If you want to also know how to switch the translations from within your application, or maybe something else that is related to localization or .NET MAUI or .NET MAUI Blazor, let me know down in the comments below and I will make a video just for you. If you've liked this video, please click that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, so that, you know, both the video will go to more people and more people can enjoy and learn from this. And if you subscribe, then the videos will come automatically to your feed, so you don't have to come looking for me with that Gerald Versluis with his weird localized last name, right? Maybe you want to learn more about .NET MAUI, then go check out this playlist, which tells you all about .NET MAUI Blazor. And if you haven't catch that video on how to implement the dialogues yet, you can do so by this video right here, or check this button if you have subscribed yet. See you later.